In the gleaming city of Dubai, where the desert's golden expanse meets towers of glass that scrape the heavens, life unfolds with an air of opulence and untold stories. Mira, a young woman from the rolling hills of Vermont, stepped out of the airport and into the sweltering heat that wrapped around her like an unexpected embrace. She wasn't here for a vacation or a brief escape from the monotony of her graphic design job back home. She was here to witness her cousin Layla's wedding, a union that promised to be as grand and intricate as the city itself. Dubai, a city of contrasts where ancient traditions linger in the shadow of futuristic ambition, felt overwhelming to Mira. Back home, life was simple: muted winters, wood-paneled diners, and quiet conversations over coffee. Here, fountains danced to unseen rhythms, the air buzzed with ambition, and every corner seemed to shimmer with untamed extravagance. The hotel where Mira stayed was no exception. Its marble floors glistened under cascading chandeliers, and the air was scented with rosewater and jasmine, an intoxicating blend that felt almost theatrical. Yet, beneath the awe, Mira felt out of place. Her life in Vermont, where she'd spent years navigating a stagnant relationship with her boyfriend Ethan, suddenly felt starkly different. Layla's wedding wasn't just an event but an experience, an immersion into a world Mira had only seen in movies. As she prepared for the first event, a welcome dinner hosted under a tent embroidered with gold threads, her thoughts lingered on the stark disparity between this life and her own. A question began to form in her heart, soft yet persistent. Is there more to life than the safety I've clung to? The scent of exotic spices wafted through the air as Mira entered the grand tent. Laughter, music, and conversations in languages she didn't understand swirled around her. Then, as her cousin approached in a dazzling white gown, her joy lighting up the room, Mira felt the first stirrings of change. Perhaps this trip wasn't just about witnessing a wedding. It might be the beginning of something she hadn't yet dared to imagine. As Mira adjusted her dress and stepped into the opulent wedding reception, her breath caught at the sheer magnitude of the event. Hundreds of guests mingled under a sprawling tent embroidered with gold and silver, their laughter and voices blending with the melodic hum of live music. The tables were adorned with cascading arrangements of desert roses and orchids, while soft lanterns cast a golden glow over the scene. The air was rich with the aroma of saffron and cardamom, a sensory feast that pulled Mira further into this otherworldly experience. Her cousin Layla was radiant, a vision in her intricately beaded gown, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist. Beside her stood her new husband, Kareem, who gazed at her as if no one else existed. Their happiness was palpable, so tangible it stirred something unfamiliar in Mira, a longing she couldn't yet define. Layla caught Mira's eye and waved her over, her face excitedly glowing. "Mira, I've been waiting for you to meet someone," she said, tugging her cousin by the hand toward a tall man standing a few feet away. "This is Amir," Layla said with a mischievous smile, her words laced with a knowing tone. Kareem's cousin. Amir turned, his dark eyes meeting Mira's with an intensity that made her heart skip. His presence was commanding yet calm, like the desert at twilight. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, he carried himself with a grace that seemed effortless. Mira could barely stammer a polite hello as Layla quickly excused herself, leaving them alone. "I've heard so much about you," Amir said, his voice deep, his accent a lyrical mix of Arabic and polished English. "And I? About you," Mira replied, suddenly acutely aware of how ordinary her words sounded. What began as small talk soon deepened into an unexpectedly effortless exchange. Amir spoke with quiet confidence, sharing stories of his childhood in Dubai, his family's roots in the desert, and his passion for architecture. Mira found herself captivated by his perspective, how he saw beauty in tradition and innovation and spoke of his people's contributions to art, science, and philosophy with a reverence that was humble and proud. Mira opened up about her own life, sharing more than she'd planned. She spoke of Vermont's simplicity, her work as a graphic designer, and even the cracks in her long-term relationship with Ethan. Amir listened intently, his gaze never wavering, and his words were thoughtful and sincere when he spoke. As the night wore on, Mira felt the weight of her past start to lift, replaced by a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. The world around them faded, the music and laughter becoming a distant backdrop. For the first time in a long time, Mira felt indeed seen. Over the following days, Mira and Amir seemed to cross paths at every turn. Whether it was a family outing to the desert or a quiet conversation over tea at Layla's home, their bond grew stronger with each interaction. Mira couldn't help but compare Amir's warmth and attentiveness to Ethan's indifference. On the third night, as the guests gathered for a formal dinner under the stars, Amir invited Mira to walk along the beach. The waves gently lapping the shore provided a soothing rhythm as they strolled, their conversation moving from light-hearted anecdotes to deeply personal reflections. Amir stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "Mira," he began, his tone more serious now, "I don't know if you realize this, but there's something about you, something different. You see the world with such clarity. It's rare." Mira felt her cheeks flush, unprepared for his candor. "I don't think anyone's ever described me like that before," she admitted. Amir smiled softly. "Perhaps no one's taken the time to see you truly." His words lingered in the air, their weight sinking deep into Mira's heart. For years, she had settled for a safe but stagnant life, ignoring the quiet voice inside her that longed for more. Standing here under the desert sky, she felt that voice growing louder. The days in Dubai passed like a dream, each filled with surreal yet profoundly real moments. Amir introduced her to parts of the city that tourists rarely saw: hidden art galleries, small family-owned cafes, and quiet corners of the desert where the stars seemed close enough to touch. Mira looked forward to every conversation and shared moments with Amir. His presence was like a mirror, reflecting back the version of herself she had forgotten, a curious, passionate, and alive woman. Yet, alongside the thrill of discovery, there was an undercurrent of guilt. Ethan's name became a shadow in her mind, a reminder of the life she had left behind. Each time Layla or Amir mentioned the future, Mira felt uncertain. One evening, Layla joined her as Mira sat on the balcony of her hotel room, watching the city lights shimmer against the desert backdrop. "You seem different," Layla said gently, handing Mira a glass of wine. "Happier, maybe, but also conflicted." Mira hesitated, then nodded. "Amir, he's incredible, Layla, but I feel like I'm betraying Ethan. We've been together for years. I owe him something." Layla placed a hand on her cousin's shoulder. "Mira, life isn't about obligation. It's about finding what makes you truly happy. You don't owe anyone your unhappiness. If Amir makes you feel alive, you deserve to explore that." Her cousin's words struck a chord, echoing the unspoken truths Mira had been avoiding. As the city slept that night, Mira made a silent promise to herself. She would no longer settle for a life that didn't fulfill her. Mira sat by the window of her hotel room, staring out at the glittering skyline of Dubai. The city seemed alive, pulsing with possibilities she had never considered before this trip. Yet her thoughts were tangled between the life she had always known and the one she could scarcely imagine. Ethan's voice echoed in her mind, a steady, critical presence that had always grounded her but now felt more like an anchor, keeping her tethered to a place she no longer belonged. It was Layla who finally gave her the nudge she needed. "You've been quiet lately," her cousin said one evening, her tone gentle but probing. They were sitting on the balcony of Layla's home, the warm night air carrying the scent of jasmine. "I'm just trying to sort things out," Mira replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Layla leaned closer. "You don't have to stay in a life that doesn't make you happy. Ethan isn't your destiny, Mira. Maybe you've already met him." The words lingered in the air, heavier than the desert heat. That night, as Mira lay awake in her hotel bed, she thought about Amir. The way he listened to her, truly listened, as though every word she said mattered. The way he shared his dreams and invited her into them painted a picture of a life filled with wonder and mutual respect. She knew what she had to do. It wasn't fair to Ethan or herself to remain in a relationship that had long since lost its vitality. The following morning, Mira called Ethan. The conversation was agonizing, filled with long silences and raw emotions. Ethan's voice swung between disbelief and anger, his words sharp and accusing. "You're throwing away 5 years for a man you barely know," he said, his tone dripping with contempt. Mira's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing to stop settling. I've been pretending to be happy for too long, Ethan. It's not fair to either of us." His final words stung, a bitter mix of resentment and desperation. "You'll regret this, Mira. I promise you." When the call ended, Mira felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. She had closed a chapter of her life filled with comfort but devoid of absolute joy. Now, she stood on the precipice of something new, terrifying yet exhilarating. Mira's decision marked the beginning of a transformation she hadn't anticipated. With Ethan behind her, she felt lighter, like a weight she had carried for years had finally been lifted. The following days with Amir were unlike anything she had ever experienced. One evening, Amir took her to the desert. The city's lights faded into the distance as they drove deeper into the dunes. The world became silent, save for the soft rustle of sand under the tires and the occasional call of a desert bird. Amir parked the car at the top of a dune, where the horizon stretched endlessly in every direction. Under a star sky, Amir spread out a blanket and unpacked a small picnic. "This is where I come to think," he said, his voice soft. "The desert reminds me of what's important. Everything here is simple, no distractions, no noise. Just life in its purest form." Mira sat beside him, the cool sand beneath her fingers grounding her at the moment. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anything like it." Amir turned to her, his expression earnest. "You're part of this beauty now, Mira. You've shown me something I didn't know I was missing. I hope I've done the same for you." His words stirred something deep within her, a quiet certainty she had never felt. For years, she had been searching for a sense of belonging, of purpose. Here, in the vast silence of the desert, she found it. Their connection deepened with every passing day. Amir introduced Mira to his family, who welcomed her with open arms. His mother, a regal woman with kind eyes, took Mira aside during one visit and said, "Amir has never spoken of anyone the way he speaks of you. You've brought him a happiness I haven't seen in years." Mira was touched by their warmth, generosity, and deep respect for tradition. She began to see herself not as an outsider, but as someone who could belong in this world. Yet, even as her relationship with Amir blossomed, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the city was quiet, Mira would think about Vermont, her parents, her friends, the life she had left behind. Could she indeed leave it all behind for this new life? It was Layla who gave her the clarity she needed. "You're not leaving your old life behind, Mira," she said one afternoon as they prepared for another family gathering. "You're carrying it with you, weaving it into something new. That's what love is. It's not about losing yourself. It's about finding someone who helps you become more of yourself." Layla's words stayed with Mira, guiding her through the moments of uncertainty. She realized that her love for Amir didn't mean forgetting her past. It meant building a future that honored every part of her identity. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Amir stopped and turned to her, his eyes filled with emotion. "Mira, I've been waiting for the right moment to say this, and I don't want to wait any longer." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a ring that sparkled like the stars above them. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Mira's eyes as she looked at him, the man who had shown her a life she hadn't dared to dream of. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will." The world seemed to disappear as Amir slipped the ring onto her finger. At that moment, Mira felt a sense of peace and joy that she had never known before. She had found her place in the world, right here, by Amir's side. Mira's yes to Amir wasn't just an answer. It was a declaration, a turning point that set the stage for the life she was ready to embrace. In the days that followed his proposal, the joy she felt seemed to radiate outward, touching everyone around her. Layla cried tears of happiness when Mira shared the news, wrapping her cousin tightly. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. "You deserve this, Mira. You deserve every bit of it." Amir's family welcomed the engagement with open arms, showering Mira with gifts and blessings. His mother presented her with a delicate gold bracelet, an heirloom passed down through generations of their family. "This is a symbol of unity," she said, clasping it around Mira's wrist. "A reminder that you are one of us now." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparations for the wedding. Mira was swept up in a world of luxurious fabrics, intricate henna designs, and endless discussions about how to blend their traditions. Amir insisted that the ceremony reflect both of their cultures. "This is not just about us," he told her one evening. "It's about the journey we're starting together, bringing the best of both worlds into one." Despite the flurry of activity, a quiet unease lingered at the edges of Mira's happiness. Ethan's final words echoed in her mind like an unwelcome shadow during their breakup. "You'll regret this." She tried to push the thought aside, focusing instead on the life she was building with Amir. But the doubts crept in during the quiet moments when the world around her stilled. One night, as Mira sat on the balcony of her hotel room, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Her heart skipped as she hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Ethan. "You think you've moved on, Mira?" he said, his tone laced with bitterness. "You think this guy can give you what we had?" Mira's hands shook, but her voice remained steady. "What we had wasn't enough, Ethan. I deserve more, and so do you. You'll regret this," he repeated, his voice a chilling whisper before the line went dead. The call left her shaken, but it also steeled her resolve. She wouldn't let the ghosts of her past dictate her future. Amir was her anchor, her savior. She told him about the call the following day, and his reaction was calm but firm. "We'll make sure he can't disturb you again," he said, taking her hand. "You're not alone in this, Mira. We're in this together." The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the sky a brilliant canvas of blue. Mira's heart swelled excitedly as she stepped into her wedding gown, a stunning blend of Western and Arab traditions, with delicate gold embroidery accentuating its flowing white fabric. Layla helped adjust her veil, her eyes brimming with pride. "You're glowing," she said with a smile. "Amir is going to lose his breath when he sees you." The ceremony was everything Mira had dreamed of and more. Under a canopy of white silk and gold flowers, she and Amir exchanged vows before their families and friends. Their words, spoken in English and Arabic, carried promises of love, respect, and partnership. The guests cheered when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the desert sky lit up with fireworks. That evening, as they drove toward their new home, a luxurious apartment with sweeping city views, Mira felt a sense of peace she had never known. She rested her head on Amir's shoulder, their hands entwined as he steered the sleek sports car through the city streets. But the peace was short-lived. As they left the bustling center of Dubai and entered the quieter outskirts, Mira noticed a black car following them. At first, she brushed it off as a coincidence, but the unease in her chest grew when the car sped up, narrowing the distance between them. "Amir," she said, her voice tight with fear. "That car. It's too close." He glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression hardening. "Hold on," he said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Before Mira could respond, the black car rammed into them with a force that sent their vehicle skidding. The world spun in a blur of metal and screams. Mira reached out instinctively for Amir, her heart pounding as their eyes met, his filled with a mix of fear and love. The impact came again, harder this time, and everything went dark. When Mira regained consciousness, the acrid smell of gasoline and the distant sirens filled her senses. Pain radiated through her body as she tried to move, only to realize she was trapped. Her wedding dress, once pristine, was now torn and stained with blood and dirt. "Amir," she croaked, her voice barely audible. "Amir, where are you?" There was no response. Panic surged through her as she turned her head, her vision blurry. In the distance, she could hear frantic voices and footsteps rushing toward them. The next moments passed in a haze. Rescue workers pried her from the wreckage, their voices urgent as they assured her she would be okay. But Mira's focus was on the figure lying on the ground a few feet away, surrounded by paramedics. She recognized the dark suit and his broad shoulders. "Amir." "No pulse," one of the paramedics called out, his tone grim as he began CPR. Mira's heart shattered. She tried to cry out, to reach for him, but her body refused to cooperate. As they lifted her onto a stretcher, tears streamed down her face. The world around her faded into the sterile white of the ambulance, her thoughts consumed by a single plea. Please, let him live. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beeping of machines monitoring Mira's fragile body. Pain racked her every movement, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, her throat dry and raw from hours of unconsciousness. Her mother's tear-streaked face came into focus, and with it, the reality she had been dreading. "Where is Amir?" Mira croaked, her voice barely audible. Her mother's grip on her hand tightened, her eyes welling with fresh tears. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Amir, he didn't make it." The words hit Mira like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She could only stare at her mother for a moment, the truth sinking in slowly, painfully. When the weight of it fully settled, a scream tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unfiltered agony. Nurses rushed into the room, administering sedatives to calm her, but nothing could numb the shattering pain. The days that followed passed in a blur of grief and confusion. Amir's funeral was a solemn affair, attended by his family, friends, and an endless stream of mourners who had loved him. Mira, confined to a wheelchair, sat at the edge of the gathering, her gaze fixed on the coffin. Her wedding ring, now a cruel reminder of the life they had barely begun, gleamed in the desert sun. As the eulogies ended and the mourners dispersed, Mira's sorrow began to mingle with something else: suspicion. The black car, the deliberate crashes, the haunting final words of Ethan's phone call, "You'll regret this." She couldn't ignore the nagging questions. Had Ethan followed her to Dubai? Could he have been involved in the crash? The idea seemed unthinkable, but the seed of doubt had been planted and grew with every passing hour. When a detective from the Dubai police visited her hospital room to discuss the accident, Mira seized the opportunity to voice her suspicions. "There was a black car," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "It rammed into us twice before we lost control." "It wasn't an accident." The detective's expression hardened. "We're already investigating the incident, Mrs. Mira. If there's foul play involved, we'll find it." Determined not to let Amir's death go unanswered, Mira threw herself into the investigation. With the help of the detective, she began piecing together what little evidence she had. The black car had been identified as a rental and booked under a fake name. Security footage showed it tailing their vehicle moments before the crash. But the most chilling discovery came weeks later. The rental car was linked to a company in America that Mira recognized immediately. Ethan's older brother owned it. The revelation sent a jolt of icy fear through her veins. The dots began to connect with terrifying clarity. Ethan had the means, the motive, and the connections to orchestrate the crash. But why? Was it jealousy? Revenge? A twisted attempt to win her back? The detective was cautious but thorough. He assured Mira that they were pursuing all leads, but the weight of her grief and fear made patience nearly impossible. She spent sleepless nights scrolling through social media, looking for any sign that Ethan had been in Dubai. Each discovery, a tagged photo, a flight record, tightened the net around him, confirming her worst fears. Mira's determination began to take on a new form: justice. She couldn't bring Amir back, but could ensure his death wasn't in vain. One evening, as she sat in her hospital room surrounded by the quiet hum of machines, the detective arrived with a solemn expression. "We've found something," he said, handing her a folder. Inside were photos of Ethan, taken by surveillance cameras at Dubai International Airport. The timestamps confirmed it. He had arrived 3 days before her wedding and left the morning after the crash. The evidence was undeniable. Ethan had followed her to Dubai, and his presence couldn't be explained away as a coincidence. The detective's tone was grim as he continued. "We've issued an international warrant for his arrest. It's only a matter of time before we bring him in." The news was both a relief and a new source of anguish. While Mira felt vindicated in her suspicions, the confirmation of Ethan's involvement deepened her sorrow. The man she had once loved, who had shared 5 years of her life, had destroyed her future out of spite. Mira's grief was no longer a solitary burden. Amir's family rallied around her, their sorrow mirrored in her eyes. His mother, who had always treated Mira like a daughter, visited her daily. "We will see this through," she said one morning, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "Amir would want us to fight for the truth." As the investigation unfolded, Mira found herself changing. Her pain, though raw and unrelenting, began to fuel her resolve. She was no longer the quiet, hesitant woman who had arrived in Dubai weeks earlier. She was a fighter, driven by love and a thirst for justice. The days turned into weeks, and finally, news came that Ethan had been apprehended at an airport in Europe. His capture made international headlines, the story of the widowed bride and her pursuit of justice capturing the world's attention. The trial that followed was both a catharsis and an ordeal. Mira took the stand, her testimony a mix of raw emotion and steely determination. She spoke of her love for Amir, their shared dreams, and the devastation of losing him. Her words moved the courtroom, painting a vivid picture of the life Ethan had stolen from her. Ethan's defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Witnesses, phone records, and rental car agreements indicated his guilt. When the verdict was announced, guilty on all charges, Mira felt a wave of emotion she couldn't fully describe. It wasn't happiness, but it wasn't despair either. It was closure. As the courtroom emptied after the verdict, Mira remained seated, staring at the empty witness stand. The words "guilty on all charges" reverberated in her mind, yet they brought little solace. Ethan had been held accountable, but no amount of justice could fill the void left by Amir's absence. Amir's mother, Layla, approached and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You were brave today," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet strength. "Amir would be proud of you." Mira nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I just wish he were here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything feels so unfinished." The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, legal formalities, and media attention. The story of Mira's pursuit of justice had captivated the world, and journalists clamored for her perspective. But Mira had no desire to relive the pain. She declined interviews, choosing instead to retreat to the privacy of her hotel room. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mira visited Amir's grave for the final time before leaving Dubai. She carried a bouquet of desert flowers, the same kind that had adorned their wedding, and knelt beside the headstone. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'll carry you with me, Amir. In my heart, in my memories, in every step I take. I promise to live a life you would be proud of." The wind rustled gently through the dunes as if offering a quiet reply. Mira pressed her fingers to the engraved letters of his name, feeling the weight of her love and loss. Then, with a deep breath, she stood and walked away, leaving behind the man she had loved but vowed never to forget him. Mira's decision to leave Dubai wasn't made lightly. The city had become both a place of profound love and devastating pain, a constant reminder of what she had gained and lost. She knew she needed a fresh start, a place to rebuild her life without the heavy shadows of the past. She chose a small coastal town in southern Spain, where the Mediterranean kissed the shore, and the pace of life was slower, more forgiving. The town's cobblestone streets and whitewashed houses offered a sense of calm that Mira desperately needed. Mira rented a modest apartment, overlooking the sea and focused on healing. She threw herself into her work, opening a small art gallery that blended local talent with pieces inspired by her time in Dubai. Art became her refuge, a way to process her emotions and honor Amir's memory. One day, while organizing a new exhibit, Mira received a letter from Layla. The envelope bore the distinctive stamp of Dubai, and Mira's heart swelled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note and a photograph of Amir's mother holding a newborn baby. "Mira, this is Kareem and my son, Amir, named in honor of the man we both loved. I wanted you to know that his memory lives on, not just in you but all of us. We miss you dearly. Visit us soon. Love, Layla." Tears streamed down Mira's face as she clutched the letter. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of connection, a reminder that even though she was far from Dubai, she wasn't alone. As the years passed, Mira's gallery flourished, becoming a beloved part of the community. Locals and tourists alike were drawn to her unique perspective and ability to capture the raw beauty of life's fleeting moments. Though she found peace, Mira never stopped thinking of Amir. His wedding band, which she now wore on a chain around her neck, was a constant reminder of the love they had shared. It didn't weigh her down. Instead, it gave her strength. One evening, as she watched the sunset over the sea, a young couple entered her gallery. They admired a painting of the Dubai desert, a piece Mira had created months after her arrival in Spain. "This is breathtaking," the woman said, her voice filled with awe. "It feels so alive." Mira smiled, her heart warm. "It's a place that taught me much about life," she said. The woman nodded. "You must have a lot of stories." "I do," Mira replied, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "And every one of them led me here." Years passed like the gentle waves that lapped at the shore near Mira's new home, steady and constant, reshaping her but never erasing the past. Her life in the small coastal town became a tapestry of quiet joys and meaningful work. The gallery thrived as a business and a sanctuary for those seeking beauty and connection. Visitors often lingered to hear Mira's stories about the art, unaware that each piece contained fragments of her journey. Though time softened the pain of her loss, Amir's presence never truly faded. His memory lived in her work, in the desert-inspired color palettes and the intricate patterns mirrored the henna designs from her wedding day. Each brushstroke felt like a quiet conversation with him, a way to keep his spirit alive. One spring morning, Mira received an unexpected package from Dubai. Inside was a beautifully bound journal with a note from Amir's mother. "Dearest Mira, we found this among Amir's belongings. It is a collection of his thoughts, dreams, and reflections, many of which he shared with you during your time together. I believe it belongs to you now to remind you of the love you both created and the life you still have ahead of you. With love, always, Fatima." Mira's hands trembled as she opened the journal, scanning the familiar handwriting. Amir had written about their first meeting, how her laugh had made the room brighter, and his dreams of the life they might have shared. One entry stood out, written just days before the wedding. "Mira is not just someone I love. She makes me want to be more. I've never felt so understood, so seen. No matter what happens, I hope she finds happiness, even if I'm not there to see it." Tears filled Mira's eyes as she closed the journal, holding it to her chest. She had spent years mourning what they had lost, but at that moment, she realized Amir would have wanted her to live fully and embrace the life they had dreamed of together. The journal became Mira's guiding light, sparking a new idea that gave her a sense of purpose. She created a foundation in Amir's name, fostering cross-cultural understanding through art and education. With the help of Layla and Amir's family, the foundation was established in Dubai. Its mission is to unite people through creative expression and dialogue. Mira's gallery in Spain became a sister organization, hosting international exhibitions and workshops celebrating diversity. The foundation's inaugural event was held in Dubai, in a gallery overlooking the desert that had been such a pivotal part of their story. As Mira stood before the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion, she spoke about Amir's legacy. Amir believed in the power of connection, in bridging worlds, in finding beauty in our differences. This foundation is a tribute to that belief, a way to continue the work he began in his life. The event was a resounding success, bringing together artists, educators, and community leaders worldwide. As Mira walked through the gallery, she felt a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't known was possible. This was more than a tribute to Amir. It was her way of turning their love into something lasting that would inspire others long after they were both gone. On her last evening in Dubai, Mira visited the desert for the final time. She brought Amir's journal, sitting on the warm sand under a star-filled sky. Opening the book to the final page, she wrote, "Thank you for showing me what love could be, Amir. I promise to carry your light into everything I do. Wherever you are, I hope you're proud." As the wind carried her words into the night, Mira felt a peace she hadn't known since the day she lost him. She stood, the sand cool beneath her feet, and gazed at the endless horizon. For the first time in years, She felt truly free, ready to face whatever the future held. Back in Spain, Mira continued to grow the foundation, hosting exhibitions that brought the world's beauty to her small coastal town. Her gallery became a haven for travelers and locals alike, where stories and cultures intertwine. While Mira was preparing a new exhibit one day, a young artist approached her. "Your story, it's inspired me to follow my dreams," the artist said. "Thank you for sharing it." Mira smiled, feeling the familiar ache in her chest, now softened by time. "We all have stories," she said. "The important thing is to keep telling them so that they can inspire others." As she watched the artist leave, Mira glanced at the painting she had just hung. A vast desert landscape, its golden hues shimmering with promise. In its corner, she had painted a small, silver star, a quiet nod to the man who had changed her life forever. With every passing day, Mira carried Amir's love forward, not as a shadow of what she had lost, but as a beacon guiding her toward the endless possibilities of what lay ahead.